Thank you very much, sir. This is Al Carney. This is the first meeting of the Water Board of 2022. I believe this is our first meeting. We have a quorum, but I'll ask the Secretary and Ethics Officer to call the roll.
Actually, Chairman Carney, Omar, did you want to make a presentation about the meeting that you normally do?
I thought I would just to read a few things into the record. I've got a very abbreviated version. So this is just for everyone's benefit. This is a meeting at the New York City Water Board. We are meeting in this digital telephone format as authorized by state law. We normally meet in person because of the ongoing pandemic and slow, hopefully, roll off of the pandemic. We are still meeting by digital conference call. I would ask you, if you are a member of the public or do not plan to speak at the meeting, please put your telephone on mute to minimize the background noise. As you probably gathered, the meeting is being recorded. A transcription and an audio recording of the meeting will be on the board's website within the next week or so. This is, I think most of you are regular attendees. This is a business meeting of the board. Public testimony is not part of this. If you have questions or comments, you can email them to us at nycwaterboard@dep.nyc.gov anytime you like, any topic you want. This meeting is not a public input meeting. We'll have more information about the public input forum shortly in the meeting, but this is not that meeting. Last thing, the meeting materials we'll be discussing have been provided already to members by email. They are also on the board's website. You go to the website, which again is nyc.gov/nycwaterboard. You go to the right-hand side, announcements column. They'll say the August 29th meeting. There's a link to the meeting materials right below it. Open up the PDF packet. The materials are there. In the PDF packet too, if you need it, there's a link for the assisted disability. If you have a difficult time hearing, or with someone who has a difficult time hearing, a link to the transcription service for that service as well. So that's everything. Al Rodriguez, the meeting is yours.
All right. Hi, I'm Al Rodriguez.
Omar, thank you very much. Al, please.
Yeah. This is Al Rodriguez, the Secretary of the Board, calling the roll. Chairman Carney?
I am present.
Member Fernandez-Ketchum?
Here.
Thank you. Member Freed?
Here.
Member Golden?
I'm present.
Member Sue?
Present.
Oh, thank you. Member Shaw?
Present.
And Member Zarrilli?
I'm here. Thanks.
We have a full house today.
Yes, we do, and we have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I want to thank all the members for joining us today. It's an important meeting. You have all received copies of the of DEP's recommendation for members of the public who may join us, and for the purposes of the transcription. We have not had any prior discussions of the presentation. Looking forward to having our new commissioner, Commissioner Agarwal, along with Joseph Maronik, the CFO of DEP, to give us that presentation. Want to thank Omar for guiding us through this, and he has been responsible for getting most of the information out to us. Omar, thank you. That's Omar Nazem. And I think there's nothing we need to do before we consider the minutes. And I don't have in front of me the date of the last meeting. It was in December of 2021. So we've not been together for a long time. Am I correct about that, Omar?
It was December 16th, yes.
December 16th. Terrific. You all have had an opportunity to take a look at the minutes. Are there any questions, corrections, concerns? Member Ketchum, Fernandez Ketchum, did we get your name right this time?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Evelyn. Are there any recommended revisions for the minutes? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve them?
This is Member Freed, so moved.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Well, then I'll second.
Thank you, Adam, for the motion, and Member Golden, thank you very much for the second. I guess because we're in the teleconference format, I should ask the secretary to actually call the roll and get the votes.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Carney, how do you vote?
To approve.
Thank you. Member Fernandez Ketchum, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Freed, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Golden, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Sue, how do you vote?
Approve.
Member Shaw, how do you vote?
Approved.
Thank you. And Member Zarilli, how do you vote?
Approved.
Okay. Unanimously adopted, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. The principal item on the agenda today is the DEP the DEP recommendation for the rate to be voted in, I believe it's May, but it may be actually in June, I'm not certain. I'll ask DEP CFO Murin to introduce the commissioner, and I will give the meeting over to the two of you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, board members. This is Joseph Murin, Chief Financial Officer for DEP and also Executive Director for the Water Board. And it's my honor to introduce the agency's new commissioner, Rohit Agarwal, who was appointed by Mayor Adams to the position on January 31st, and who also has the privilege of being the the city's Chief Climate Officer. So without any further ado, I'm going to let, Rid, as he likes to be called, take the chair, but take the mic and go from there. So, Commissioner.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the members of the Water Board. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, both in this role, leading this important agency, and speaking to you all. I think the Water Board is an important institution, and I'm very grateful for the work that you all do individually and as a group. I'm happy to report that DEP is in very good shape. And as our first slide here suggests, over the course of the pandemic, the most important thing is that the water and sewer system operated. It was not materially impacted by the pandemic. This is a record that not every utility in the United States has, but our service levels, as it was related to the pandemic, showed no decline, and it's well known, as you all discussed at your last meeting, that there were some impacts of Hurricane Ida on the city and on DEP, but those were separate from the pandemic. We've seen some system operations that have been impacted by the ongoing effects of the pandemic, including a reduced headcount. As we all know, across the whole economy, there have been people leaving their jobs. Hiring has been very difficult, particularly in certain skilled roles like engineers, which DEP has many of. And so our headcount is measurably below our budgeted personnel levels. And that is one challenge. It's a management challenge right now. I don't think it's a real danger just yet, but it is something that we are focused on, both at DEP and, of course, at City Hall. As you probably know, all city agencies, including DEP, return to the office for a 5-day-a-week in the office approach to work in September 21. Of course, about half of DEP's employees were working on the job physically throughout, because their jobs did not allow any sort of work from home accommodation, but everybody was back in the office as of September. And along with many institutions in the broader economy, we've had innovations that we've adopted. certain styles of work, not necessarily working from home on a regular basis, but we've realized how valuable some of the innovations we've identified during the pandemic have been. And looking ahead to the rest of this year, I think the first thing that we're going to be focusing on is recruiting and hiring and training. We are making a significant effort to bring our staffing back towards those levels to which we are budgeted. And I will say that, as I've been talking with the senior staff at the agency, and I think there's going to be a need and an opportunity to think strategically about the agency's future. When Vinny Sapienza was commissioner, the agency, as you probably know, did a strategic plan. The time horizon of that plan ended, along with the mayoralty of Bill de Blasio. And I think looking forward, it probably makes sense for the agency to take a clear, analytically driven look at its needs, its priorities, and its opportunities to create a vision that can bind the agency together, can help us ensure that we are prioritizing future investments in the best way possible. And we are doing everything that the agency needs, everything that the city needs us to be doing to serve the people. And I will say, actually, mentioning Vinny, that I think we should all be very, very grateful, as I often say, every single day, that Vinny Sapienza has been willing to remain at DEP as Chief Operating Officer. He brings so much expertise and dedication, as you all know on the Water Board, and I know that his continued presence is an invaluable contribution, and I'm very grateful for that.
Mr. Commissioner, it's Al Carney.
Please.
May I add to that comment? His former Commissioner Sapienza, who is on the phone, brings extraordinary institutional history, both to DEP and to the Water Board. We have benefited enormously from his knowledge, but also from the directions in which he has taken the agency, as well as the Water Board. Vinny, I know you're on. I'm sure I'm embarrassing you. I apologize for that, but I don't retract any of my comments. Thank you so much for what you have done to make the agency and this board function the way we do. Very grateful to you for that.
Thank you, Chair Carney, for your kind words, and I'm having a terrific time in my new role, and Commissioner Agarwal has been great, and I want to thank him for his kind words as well.
Thanks, sir.
No problem. Thank you, and of course, well merited. And in fact, what I'll list a couple of projects of significance that we've made real progress on, and again, I'll point out as the new guy here, almost all of this is entirely Vinny's work and not mine. I just get to report on it today. But among the major milestones at the agency, probably the biggest single thing in 2021 was the implementation of our new billing system, the UMAC system. And having a new billing tool for the whole agency is a massive achievement, one that I think we should all be very proud of, especially having implemented it successfully during a pandemic. It was the largest financial software upgrade undertaken by the agency in 25 years. It addresses a major pain point both for the public and for the agency internally in terms of the sophistication of our billing. And it was a significant effort by key staff, including Deputy Commissioner Lynch, who's on the phone, who leads the Bureau of Customer Service, Vinny himself, Joe Mirren, and a number of people at the agency. So that's a big achievement. One of the things we are working on now is fully exploring what we can do to better serve the public with the new capabilities we have beyond what's already been implemented in terms of a more attractive bill and easier to understand bill, and the greater accuracy and reliability that it offers. There's an upside that we will be exploring. You all know, of course, that work on the Delaware Aqueduct bypass tunnel is an important initiative. That is progressing well. It is, of course, the largest repair project in the history of our water system. We are working right now in the home stretch of the project, coordinating the timetable for the tunnel shutdown. There are lots of factors that go into ensuring that we can do the shutdown that allows us to cut in the new tunnel. We're working with other municipalities that are going to be affected. We're working with the regulators. And of course, we're undergoing a set of operations to ensure that water supply will be uninterrupted during the period of the shutdown. And we'll have more to report on that project when next you meet. A couple of other things just to note, we've completed new sewer construction in Canarsie and East New York to the tune of $148 million. There's been a $15.7 million set of improvements to the Jerome Park Reservoir that's been completed. We are underway with a $29 million package of upgrades at 19 NYCHA facilities, which are dominated by green infrastructure focused on mitigating stormwater. We've completed work on an $18 million partnership with the Department of Transportation at Montefiore Square. And we've commenced work to significant relief from some folks in that neighborhood on a $7 million drainage upgrade in the westerly neighborhood of Staten Island, which includes new storm sewer and catch basin installations, as well as water supply, water main upgrades. And those are just some examples, and I will just say, beyond what's on the slide, as I have met with members of the city council, other electeds, members of community boards, and others, as an incoming commissioner, there's both a huge level of enthusiasm for the work that DEP does and its capital investments, a very great level of respect for the timeliness, for the professionalism with which those projects are delivered. But I will say a massive demand for more, whether it is around completing the work to bring sewers to storm sewers to the entire city, dealing with the increased and rightfully so concerns about climate change and what that means for stormwater flooding, and any number of other concerns. There is a real demand. And the final slide that I will present before I ask Joe to take over is on the next one, which there is good news, which is that, as many of you know, we have a robust 10-year capital plan ahead of us. Right now, we're expecting it to be a $25 billion capital plan. That's consistent with what the mayor presented in his executive budget that was released earlier this week, and we are optimistic, optimistic. I won't say confident, because the city council, of course, has to weigh in, but we're optimistic that the city council will endorse it pretty much unchanged. And the members who have the document can see that the biggest increase over the last 2 years has been the increase in funding for sewers, much of which is for stormwater management, given what we all experienced during Hurricane Ida. Let me pause there, and Joe, I believe you're going to handle the next couple of slides.
Yes, thank you.
Before you go on, I'm going to ask whether any of the members, Mr. Commissioner, have questions for you, particularly with regard to some of the last comments you made. I have a couple of questions. Would you rather that we hold them to the end of the of DEP's presentation, or should we ask now those things that have caused questions?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm certainly going to be here for the duration, so perhaps if you don't mind, let's let Joe and Omar complete their portion, and then we can have as long a set of conversations and questions as the board wishes.
So you're going to make me keep good notes.
We're all well served when the chairman of an important institution keeps good notes.
Thank you, sir.
Yes,
Joseph, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. And I will move on to the next slide, but I want to preface before I get into that, building on what the Commissioner just said, in terms of the capital program, just as a reminder for the general public, and, the board members know this as well, that the rates that we implement that raise the water and sewer revenue are integral to paying for the two biggest components, which is the operations and maintenance of the system, as well as the capital program. And, Commissioner just went through the capital program and the debt service that's related to the capital program. And so there have been a lot of variations or changes that we're dealing with over the, this past year that we'll, delve into now. But first starting with the bond market conditions slide, which are changing. And the cost of selling New York City water and sewer debt remains low. Market interest rates began trending upward during the fourth quarter of calendar year 2021, with most benchmark rates increasing at an especially sharp increase in short-term borrowing rates on U.S. government obligations. The increase in benchmark rates has led to increased market rates in the municipal bond market. And despite recent increases in interest rates, the systems can still borrow at rates comparable to long-term average borrowing rates. And I would draw the attention of the board and the public to the bottom, table off to the right, where it shows that the current rates are slightly higher, but not that variable from the 20-year average. And, most of our debt is within the longer term, portfolio of 20 to 30 years out there versus more, short-term and variable rates. Together with higher rates of price inflation and higher borrowing costs, are likely to increase the system's cost. Credit rating on the water board bonds remain high based on the board authorities and willingness to sell rates and set rates, that meet the system's funding requirements. I'm going to pause there because I do know that we do have, because I know this is probably something that maybe, I'll deviate from the commissioner's request, but that we do have Dave Womack, the Chief Executive Officer from the Water Finance Authority, and also Ola Chernot, the Executive Director. So if there were any questions that the members of the chair or others had on the rates, that, might be a good time just to interject at this point.
Well, one of our members is a very expert bond lawyer. I'll ask Arlene whether she has questions whether she wants to wait until the end of the presentation to raise any questions that she may have. We also have a water expert on this board, Adam Freed, and Adam may have some questions based on several things that have been said already. You may both choose to wait until the end of the presentation to raise your issues or questions, but don't hesitate to raise them now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to wait until the end.
All right. Member Shaw?
Is Arlene. I'm happy to wait till the end as well. Yeah, I'm happy to wait
Okay.
till the end as well.
Okay.
Outstanding. Then let's ask Olga Chernot to tell us where she sees the marketing of our bonds. Are we going to be able to achieve the pricing that we believe is reasonable given the rising interest rates?
Olga, do you want to take that, or?
Good
Would you
afternoon.
like
David, maybe I can start, and please chime in if I missed anything.
Sure.
But maybe let me start with saying that the authority currently has 32 billion of bonds outstanding, and to finance DP's capital program, which the commissioner introduced on the previous slide, we are expecting to sell about 1.8 billion of additional bonds annually, and that's over the next 5 years, so through 2026. It is a lot of debt, but we have a very experienced team, and we have a number of tools at our disposal. We always diversify our bond offerings between fixed rate bonds, variable rate bonds, different couponing structures. So while it's been definitely in the capital markets that we've experienced, I would say more recently, since probably the start of this calendar year, We are prepared to do what's needed to place the bonds efficiently in the market the best we can. I want to say that our credit ratings remain stable and high. It's for the second resolution bonds, which our main credit, it's just one notch below the highest AAA rating from all three rating agencies that rate their bonds. That's Fitch, Moody's, and S&P. And that's a great plus because in challenging markets, credit matters, and having strong credit ratings will be very important. It is very important now, and it will be very important going forward.
Olga, thank you. Are we trending? Are we refunding? I'm sure we are. I know we are. But are we seeing more refundings as interest rates rise? And are we seeing a shift from from variable rate to fixed rate instruments going forward? How do you? I know you don't have your crystal ball with you today, but if you did have it, what do you think it would say?
Maybe I'll take that. We have been, aggressively refinancing and refunding our debt, the authority's debt, to lower interest rates, and we've enjoyed quite a run for the last few years as rates have stayed at historical lows. Certainly, as rates rise, we'll continue to have refunding opportunities. They may not be as robust as they were, but they are still there. What you're probably seeing, oddly enough, is that fixed rates have risen faster than short-term variable rates, and so you may actually see a shift in the other direction, or away from fixing out debt. At least on the city side, we have aggressively fixed rates when we could finance in the at less than 1% or in the 1% range, but with market rates in the 2.5 to 3 point range, our variable rate has an all-in cost of like 1%. So, again, as Olga said, we try to take advantage of every opportunity there is in the market. You could see by the size of the capital program, we don't really have a choice not to borrow. This capital program has to be executed. Ratings are very important because as rates go up, there's going to be a wider spread between higher and lower rated credits. So we've seen credits between AAAs and AAs and AAs and single A's widen significantly as rates have gone up. So that's a critical factor for us.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Commissioner, you asked us to wait. Forgive me. I didn't want to lose those questions. And David, Olga, thank you both very much for filling in that space for me. Appreciate it.
Not a problem, Mr. Chairman. It's your meeting.
Wait, sorry to start, Lien. I know I lied as well. So just wanted to sort of just pause on that point right now. Yeah, I know I lied. Just wanted to sort of. Do we have a sense? Do we? I would think it would be helpful if we could just, sort of high level kind of give some of the broad strokes of analysis as to why the credit ratings for the agency is so high, because I think that becomes critical in making sure we understand how we preserve that as rates become higher. Just as someone who deals in bonds, like I know the variable difference between selling AAA paper versus sort of even going a notch down. So just wanted to understand, from the rating agencies, what is the sense as to why it's so highly rated?
Olga, do you want me? I'll start, and maybe you can fill in. I think it has been, the authorities and DEP's management of its resources, its ability to maintain, very solid cash flow, and coverage of its debt service and operating costs, and that even through the pandemic, it has not varied significantly. It's been able to, and the authority and DEP have been able to manage very effectively. So while, for example, some of the cities, general obligation ratings were put on negative watch, and there was at least one downgrade, the Water Authority, that did not happen. It's a dedicated revenue credit, and in some precincts, the investors prefer that. But from a credit standpoint, it's just been the steadiness of the management and the reality of the cash flows that the authority and DEP have been able to maintain the cash flow levels consistent with those high grade ratings. Olga?
That's great news, David. Thank you. It is comforting.
And another component I just want to add is also structural. So the authority bonds are structured as a gross lien pledge, and the bonds also have a number of important legal protections that help support the strong ratings on the authority's debt.
It'll be interesting to hear further in this presentation the impact of the rising level of receivables on the two subject matters that you all just raised. It may be too soon to know. It may be, and it may be that these are issues that we are working hard to resolve and know how to resolve. But it'll be interesting to see if the receivable levels will impact our ratings ultimately. But I'll wait and see what folk have to say about that. David, thank you, and thank you, Olga, for your leadership here. These are very, very important matters that people don't think about. Ratepayers don't think about why it is important that we understand the bifurcation between fixed and variable debt. You are on it, and of course that's what we pay you for. Thank God. Fingers crossed. Hang in there.
Mr. Chairman, this is Dan Zarrilli with a quick question on this. I'm curious the role of the board's ability to raise rates in the way that it does, and how much that impacts the high rating of the debt itself. How would you characterize the importance of that piece of information?
Is this a David question?
Yeah.
David Womack?
Yes,
I'll start.
It is. Yeah,
I'll start. It is important because the agencies view the board as independent, and view the rate setting mechanism as somewhat as independent of the political process, in that it's not a legislatively decided amount. Obviously, it's a public board and there's public input, but they do view the independent rate setting mechanism as a positive. Olga?
And I would just add to this, as a utility bond, this is, the ratings definitely take into account debt service coverage levels. And so to the extent the system generates, the system needs to generate sufficient revenues to maintain those coverage levels that the rating agencies have come to expect to see. So it's definitely a very important role that the board plays in setting the rates, and ultimately, that helps the bond ratings.
Olga, thank you, and David,
Great, thank
you. Dan, are you comfortable? Was that the answer that you'd? Hopefully, it's the answer you hoped for. How's that?
No, it's insightful. I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, sir. I don't have any further questions. Arlene, do you have anything else? Okay, then why don't we continue, Mr. Commissioner, with with the DEP presentation.
Okay, so I'll pick back up then. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm now on the slide, which will be headed DEP and the boards maintain billing and collection activities in fiscal year 22 while facing challenges from customer delinquencies and lower water consumption. So this will get into the revenue and the accounts receivable. Billing and collection activity by DEP and the board faced the headwinds of customer payments deferral and lower water consumption during fiscal year 22. Through April 27, 2022, revenues were $3.14 billion, which was an increase of compared to the same time in fiscal year 2021 of 3.6%, above the 2.76% rate increase that was implemented for fiscal year 2022. Financial headwinds faced by TV and the board include the balance of overdue customer bills, which is higher than before the pandemic. B, water consumption levels below the quantity of water used prior to the pandemic, which we'll get into in the next slide. And C, availability of collection tools, including reauthorization and ability to sell liens secured by the overdue water bills. During the pandemic, residential and commercial customers faced with loss of income deferred paying their water and sewer bills. As the recovery progressed, we are seeing signs of customers who fell behind on their water and sewer bills starting to make payments to restore balance to good standing. Where this leads to on the next slide, water consumption by metered accounts remained below pre-pandemic level, with recent consumption data showing an upward trend. So we have on that slide the graph showing the breakdown between the residential and non-residential consumption. And as you could see from the start of July of fiscal year July 18, which would have been fiscal year 2019, we started to see a downward trend, particularly in the non-residential, which went as high as negative 30+%, but has recovered for somewhat, but is still in the minus 15%. The residential was not as severely impacted, with the decline ranging anywhere from below 4 to 5% range, but has recovered for the most part. And remember that residential, bills account for about 80% of our revenue source there. So we're seeing, the consumption uptrend, which is helpful, not so much though on the non-residential side, where this has also, been compounded was, as alluded to, is the fact that we did see a decline in customer payments. Accounts receivable, grew during the pandemic at this point in time, and we're at about $778 million of accounts receivable greater than 30 days old. We started, part of this was compounded by the fact that we were, prohibited under, executive order from the governor in terms of sending out delinquency notices. And this went across the state for all of utility bills. That was lifted at the end of calendar year 2021. And subsequent to that, we have started to issue the delinquency notices once again. And we're getting some positive trends. We're not yet, certain enough that it's going to be able to reverse the trends of, the decline in, customer payments. But we are also, in conjunction with sending out the delinquency notices, we are beginning to look at other, measures that we could look into in terms of collections. One of the most significant ones being the lien sale. The lien sale was deferred, from, 2019. We did not have one last year, and that was also not done because we were going through the billing system being rolled out. So it wouldn't have been really doable for us with the pandemic and with the constraints of having to roll out the new billing system to also, have gone through the lien sale. Lien sale authorization has expired at this time, so the administration is working to have it reauthorized with the council. Those negotiations are ongoing. The assumption is built into the rate proposal that we are putting before the board today that lien sales will be reauthorized and they will be held sometime during fiscal year 23. So that's up till the end of July of, July 2023. We, cannot say with certainty when that will happen, and we will have to monitor that very closely. As I said, concurrently, we're also working to implement other aggressive collection methods where possible to be able to, reach out and, have our, especially those ratepayers that have, been delinquent during the pandemic period. We think many of those were temporary situations, so hopefully as the economy recovers, those individuals will also be able to get back on their feet and be able to make their payments again. What I will, add at this point before we go on to the slide with the rate proposal is that part of what we have built into this and, the context again of the entirety of the package here is, the revenue that will be raised by the water and sewer rates, which we have going from $3.5 billion to about $3.7 billion from fiscal year 22 to 23. So that's what the rate proposal will, encompass there. Which, as I said, that encompasses the payment for the system's operations costs, which are expected to go from about $1.6 billion in fiscal year 22 up to $1.76 billion in fiscal year 23. Part of that is inflation. We have seen increase in costs related to chemicals. We've seen increased demands and need for, operations and maintenance expenses throughout the system. We've seen some increase in our cost of collective bargaining, which is a small part, but for the fringe benefits, so that was another element, and then some of the related costs for upstate operations as well. Overall, the financing part, the debt service, defeasance, cash finance, capital, and the authority and the board's expenses are, for the most part steady, in the cash flow, which the rate consultant, Amawalk, is also on the phone, those are being finalized. We expect that report, which we call, colloquially the Blue Book, which we normally have ready for the public hearings, that we're in the process of pulling together, and we'll be getting that out to the board members as well, which will lay out some of the, many of the elements which I just went through. So with that being said, that leads to the rate proposal. DEP is recommending that the board increase rates by 4.9%. That's the in-city rate. This will also include $30 million of proposed customer affordability programs funding, preserving the 50% increase that was authorized last year by the board in fiscal year 22 to carry into fiscal year 2023. There is no budgeted rental payment for that the city is expecting to get from the system in fiscal year 2023. I think as, in this slide, you'll see this is, a relatively moderate rate increase comparatively, and I believe, it's consistent with what other municipalities have been doing over this past year, maybe a little higher, but then we also did have a number of lower years when other, entities were raising their rates. As noted, this ensures revenue sufficiency to fund the system's expanding capital construction program. It maintains the high rating from the bond, maintains our ability to continue to get high ratings from the bond rating agencies. It protects the system from the risk of rising interest rates and inflations. It'll support hiring and retention initiatives to return headcount to budget levels. And it supports expanded analytical capabilities, including analysis of customer data enabled by the new billing system. With that being said, I will pause now to see if the chair or any of the members have any questions before I turn it over to Omar.
Are there questions from the members? Joseph, nobody wants to suggest that a recommendation of 4.9% is not high enough, and I'm certainly not going to suggest that. But I wonder why 4.9% rather than 5% or 5.1%, whatever the numbers might have been. Why is that number, which is clearly below 5, and that may have been the objective, why is that number in the view of DEP an adequate number? If we raised the rates by 5.1%, clearly we would not be popular, but we would not be popular by 1/10 of a percentage point. And I'm wondering whether we, and it's in my view, a legitimate question. Are we doing are we doing the ratepayers a disservice by not raising the rates even higher?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to let defer to the commissioner first if he wants to answer that. I mean, so Commissioner,
Well,
I could address it
yeah.
if you'd like.
Let me just say, I think, Chairman, so first of all, as we all know, projections are projections, and
Of course.
whenever it comes to a tenth of a percentage point, even with a 1-year outlook, you start questioning whether your model is really accurate enough to say, 5.0 versus 4.9 is, justified, whereas 4.9 is not, or something like that. So I think we have to recognize that even though we're dealing with very large numbers here, a tenth of a point is an error bar. Again, I think we do, of course, want to keep rates as low as we can, as long as we are being responsible in terms of funding what the system needs. And I think with these projections, especially combined with, as Joe pointed out, I am in fact very optimistic that our efforts to collect the overdue, the delinquent revenue will pay off. And it will probably pay off a little bit in the current fiscal year, but more in the next fiscal year. And we have reasonably conservative budgets for that. So there's some upside here as long as we do a good job of collecting all of those delinquencies. And again, I think we will. If you want to give us 5.0 or 5.1, I'm sure we'd be happy to. As you know, also, though, we have a history of having a small surplus at the end of the year. So we've just tried to balance.
I was going to point that out, actually. Thank you.
We were just going to try to balance the fact that this is, you can look at the data. This is the largest. If you all approve this rate increase, it will be the largest in 9 years. And so we recognize the fact that it is a significant increase. We also know that there are pressures that may push us to do more in the future. But we want to do so based on analysis and based on the work we have to do in the very near term of building up the hiring and collecting the delinquent revenue. I don't know, Joe or Omar, feel free to chime in.
Well, and I'll add to the commissioner's comment, and what you also just, I think, commented on too, Mr. Chair, is that we do have, as I noted, Ed Marcus from Amawalk, the systems rate consultant, who is the one that will, puts all these factors into the model that comes up with the rate that we put forth to the board. And there are always externalities that, come in and out of this, such as there might be a surplus, there might be some deficits that we haven't taken into account. We try as much as possible to make full account of those. We know that one thing that's in here, but maybe is not as fully, funded as it should be, is heat, light, and power, which we put, a factor in for a certain amount. When the mayor released the budget the other day, it was a higher amount there. It wasn't higher enough, though, that it would make us have to deviate from the model as we get there, because we also have other factors that are in here that aren't fully considered, such as the revenue, which we talked about earlier. We're running, as this slide indicated, we're 3.76%. I'm sorry, what was it, Omar? We're 3.6% ahead of revenue target right now. So that's going to give us a little bit of cushion that we could then use to offset some of the inflationary, elements from there. Omar, I'm going to just turn to you if you want to add anything from your perspective.
No, I think it's always a balancing test between funding the system, maintaining the coverage that keeps the rating agencies not just satisfied but pleased to give the bonds the ratings they do, and maintaining average bills to the customers that are digestible to them. And it's a tricky balance in any year. It's a little more. It's not as tricky as it was last year, but it's still tricky this year, just with the kind of the income shock of the pandemic wearing off, I think all of us a little bit have the sense of, well, it may be beneficial to be a little cautious just since the economy is still recovering, incomes still are recovering, and it may make sense to go a little softer on people this year than in 2 years from now or 3 years from now. Now, of course, it is a big financial model. At the end of the day, there's an error term around every assumption you make, and you can tweak assumptions to come up with slightly different numbers, of course. But I think our view was in trying to strike that balance between funding the system, satisfying all the constituencies, and not shocking the households is something that would come at for so many of them at a bad time, to be a little more cautious in terms of putting through too much.
I'm not.
Chair, I'll let, I don't know if you want to also inquire of the, of Ed Marcus.
I know that Ed's on the phone, and I was actually going to. I'm sure that he has been pivotal in your decision making here. Amawak has been with us for a long time, and we have relied on them very heavily. And Ed is, and I've gotten to know you, Ed. I'm glad that you're with us on the phone today. I don't want to be. I don't like the idea that the record will indicate that I asked the question about whether or not it's rational to look at and consider a higher rate increase. But I'd love to hear you on this. We can do it at the end of the meeting after Omar's presentation or not, as you see fit. But I need to get a sense of whether or not we're being overly cautious, given the issues that we are dealing with. We have to increase hiring. We have to diminish receivables. We have to spend time understanding what impact the pandemic will continue to have. But to the Commissioner's point, it is the maintenance of the system that is my primary concern. I mean, I want for ratepayers to be comfortable that we're doing everything we can, and I think we are. But it's the maintenance, the quality maintenance of the system that gets my attention all the time. And to the extent, Ed, that you think that we can do this, there may be higher increases later, but I'd like to hear you at some point, and maybe we do it later on. You don't have to do this now. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I'd like
no
to hear
problem.
Emma walk on this at some point.
And
Okay.
then, sorry, this is Arlene Shaw again. I think, so Mr. Chairman, I think what may be helpful too is if we sort of have an understanding of sort of what you got. Not, obviously, we don't want to dig through your financial model, but I think it may be helpful to the chairman's point if we could see some sort of idea about what inflationary and sort of industry-wide, like macroeconomic trends that are built into the model, right? Because just like when we're talking about cash flow and like cash flow being king in terms of our rating, then understanding increased cost of like chemicals and like sort of also, just kind of understanding what assumptions we're building in to deal with the macro like economic environment right now, I think would probably help to reassure everyone that we're choosing the right rate, right? Because that's driving sort of all of the environmental pressures, right? Russia, Ukraine, cost of chemicals, right? The fact that China is shut again and a lot of chemical production kind of happens in, Asia, and just sort of understanding what environmental things we're building into those models.
There are always many moving parts, but this year the moving parts are perhaps quite a bit larger in terms of the range of outcomes. But every utility in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic is facing the same type of situation in terms of that balance that the Commissioner and Omar talked about, in that looking to make sure that the cash flows are adequate, but at the same time, reasonable impact on customers. But be happy to discuss our assumptions and other information later if you'd like.
Ed, thank you. I think, Arlene, you're absolutely right. It would be a discussion that we would all benefit from. And maybe this board, in another public meeting between now and the first borough meeting, would benefit from having Ed and his folks give us a sense of what the models, the econometric models look like. I would like the benefit of that, Ed, or you can do it with us individually. There may be board members who have no interest in this at all, but I'd like to understand, to Arlene's point, what was considered in the ultimate in the analysis that got us to the ultimate conclusion. Mr. Commissioner, would you you don't have to authorize it, but if we chose to have a meeting, a quick meeting, a half-hour meeting between now and the first borough hearing, would love to do something like that and get clear from Ed and his people, and from Omar, and from you, and Joseph as well. Just want to make sure that we've considered everything. The board is clear on the elements of the decision.
I mean, of course, we're happy to provide whatever the board needs to feel comfortable with its recommendations. So,
okay,
of course,
terrific. Then Omar, if you would, I hate to ask you to do this because I know how difficult it is to get the members of this board together on a phone call, but it would be great to not do it now, but to do it later in a call that where Ed Marcus is the principal presenter.
If I may interject, this is Joe Murin,
Sure.
Chair. One thing I would suggest is, as I indicated, Ed Marcus has put together and we're finalizing cash flow analysis, and I think that will probably answer I'd say probably 90% of the questions raised. But we can also go through and probably annotate that, and then have it available for the public hearings as well, and have it a preview for the board members as well. So we could probably circulate that. And then once you and the members have had a chance to review it, we could then assess, whether we want to have a follow-up meeting to go through those details so you understand and be able to go through. I think it'll probably answer a lot of the questions.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, because I think it'll show people sort of cash in, cash out, and where we're increasing percentages to make sure the cash in matches the cash out.
Right. And I wanted to be cognizant of, the timing and just, and again, if the board does want to have a convene before, we can do that as well. But I think it'll probably answer most everything that was raised so far in this, and, some
It's
of the
a great
stuff.
idea, Joe. Thank you very much for offering it up. We will go in that direction. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, Omar, you are the next presenter. Forgive me for interrupting the flow here. But we'll have a lot of questions for you too.
Okay. So I'm on the slide where residential customers with normal levels of water use will see a small increase in their monthly bills. What we do is we take that recommended rate increase and we apply it to some illustrative customer situations. We of course have tens of thousands of different situations based on people's buildings and usage patterns. We try to abstract that away and pick a few representative cases aimed really at the residential market. And what you get to, if you do that exercise, is you're seeing on a monthly basis, if the typical household increases for the water and sewer in the $3 to $4 a month range. We express it in the per month because that's the unit of budget people tend to intuitively think about. And the $3 to $4 a month is it's not nothing, but if you compare it to like a typical cable company increase of 5 or 6% a year on a $200 a month bill, it's less than that, and that's a cost a lot of people will be familiar with, and they won't love paying that increase either, of course. But compared to the inflation you see in many other things going into household budgets, it's a more palatable number. Just in terms of what those examples are, we have two metered examples in this page, and
somebody needs to go on mute. We're getting interference in the call.
In terms of these, thank you, Alfonso. We have two metered examples on the page and two unmetered examples. The two metered examples are a typical freestanding or attached single-family residence, probably in one of the boroughs, using 70,000 gallons a year. 70,000 gallons a year of water is in the scheme of household usage, not particularly high. If you go to a suburban environment, people are using 160,000 gallons a year. 70,000 is fairly water efficient. It's typical usage in the city of New York. We also look at what is a typical multifamily apartment unit. The multifamilies tend to use less water per unit since there's no yard, there's less space in the apartment on average in the house. There's about 52,000 gallons a year is typical usage for an apartment unit. The two unmetered rates we look at are our conservation-oriented multifamily conservation rate, which is really geared toward affordable houses that install water efficiency improvements. They got to install a meter, actually. They have a meter in there to track the usage, but they're not built on a metered rate. It's about $1,100 a year per unit for that rate. The monthly increase there in the affordable world is about $4 a year. And then the last one we have is it's a tiny rate. Not many people are in, but we always mention it because it's an attractive rate for a lot of properties with kind of a retiree or kind of small household profile. If you're using less than 90 gallons of water a day, your annual bill works out at $465 or so. And we're not increasing that rate at all, the so-called minimum charge rate. We're going to hold that one steady. We've held that steady for a number of years now. So if you're using water at a very water efficient rate, less than 90 gallons a day, your rate won't increase at all. Okay. But even for those households bearing the rate increase, $3 to $4 a month is the typical bill impact to look for. Are there any questions on that slide?
No, sir. None. Not me.
So I'm going to flip on to the next slide. The next slide, this is the sort of table that shows the package of customer affordability programs. And the table, the slide is identical as what we had last year other than the title. So the recommendation is to carry forward the sort of the 4 bill credit, or the 3 bill credit affordability package as we had it last year into this year. I want to kind of emphasize that what we did last year, what the board did last year, was to put through a fairly large increase in the dollar funding for the program. We were running a $20 million a year affordability program. The board bumped it up to 30 last year. DEP is proposing let's keep the 30 in place again this year. The funding expansion was broad-based. It was distributed across both of the programs. We have there's a sort of a single-family small property owner program. The Home Water Assistance Program aimed at mostly single-family properties where the household is in a property tax abatement program or in a utility bill assistance program, and there's income verification performed for the program by one of our partner agencies. The other program is similar to the MCP program, geared toward the affordable housing world, and in that case it's application-based, but the landlords apply, they receive a per apartment credit as approved, and then a portion of that benefit flows through into the rent roll and results in rent abatement for the tenants in those buildings. The last program is the smallest funding on the page, but I always mention it because people don't know about it. It's just for public awareness. It's the leak forgiveness program. If a household has the outsized water consumption because of a leak, whether it's a plumbing amenity or something happens, and the leak is corrected, if you report it in, you show us a change in consumption, we can verify it. In the billing system, we knock off half the dollar cost of the leak. So it's a very attractive. It's sort of you fix the leak quickly, let us know about it, and you get half off type of a program. People don't know about it. It's an underutilized program, in my view, but it's in here as an important affordability initiative. So are there any questions I can take from folks on that slide?
None here, Omar. Thank you.
And the next one is, this is a slide we've seen for in a number of formats over a number of years. But what we do is we look at kind of a representative single-family property, that sort of that brownstone in Brooklyn or that single-family house in Queens, and we compare water use to what, for similar consumption, you would see in a basket of 30 other large cities scattered around the country. And we've been below kind of that benchmark basket of prices for many years. But what's happened is, as we've managed the system well, maintained costs well, and the authority's done a stupendous job of keeping the balance sheet and the cost of debt low, you've seen year after year our relative affordability increases. So while we're increasing rates and the 30-city basket is increasing rates, our increases have been less than what you've seen elsewhere, and that relative affordability has kind of grown and grown and grown. It's not well, people don't love the message, well, my rate's going up, I'm becoming more affordable, but you sort of are if you think about, well, if you don't pay the rate here, you're paying it elsewhere, and, they're going up 5-6%, here it's been 1-2-3%, even now it's kind of below the benchmark rate. So it makes the point, even though the bill is going up on a relative basis, and you got to pay water somewhere, it's going up by less than elsewhere. So that's that one. And then I'm going to flip to the next one. This is kind of the policy amendment slide. I won't go through all these in detail, but we're going to have a markup of the board's rate schedule, which is the big legal document that describes all the minutiae about how we do the bills and the charges and how we calculate kind of regular billing situations or special requests for accommodation. We have 4 changes we're going to put through here. The 2 I'm going to flag are the second and third points on the list. The multifamily plan had a surcharge in place for properties that haven't provided paperwork and completed applications by the end of this fiscal year. It was a 10% surcharge. We're going to push the surcharge one more year in the recommendation packet to June 30th, 2023. So the recommendation is to push the rate back, the surcharge 1 year back. Otherwise, it would be implemented. It would need to be implemented next year, but for a change or an extension of the compliance deadline. The third bullet is the other one I'll mention. We're just clarifying how late interest charges are calculated on the wholesale bills. This is obviously an NC-focused meeting, but we're clarifying how late interest is charged on the wholesale bills if you don't pay the bill on time. The other 2 will be detailed in the rate schedule. Will all be the subject of the rate hearings, but those are kind of the 2 I wanted to draw attention to.
I believe the next slide is mine, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So DEP recommends that the board also increase water rates for the wholesale customers. We're requesting the board to consider an allowance quantity rate increase of up to 4.9% for wholesale customers north of New York City. Wholesale rates have only been increased twice in the last 6 fiscal years, and we can see that if you look down at the bar chart below. A typical end consumer water bill would increase by $7 per year. Recommended rate increase for amount in excess of the allowance quantity in line with the city's increase of 4.9%. So this is our upstate, wholesale water sales, which come to approximately, I have the number somewhere here, Omar, what's it, about $80 million?
$85 million a year.
Right, and, so the actual increase, some of these residents or users upstate might be more than this proposed, cap or, ceiling of 4.9% because they may add on charges. But, and we think it's actually going to be less than this 4.9%. The rate consultant, Amawak, is still working on it. They should have that, finalized by, the time we bring it to the final proposal to the board. But this allows us to be able to go forth and, propose the rate increase and have the hearing on that one as well. That ends this portion of the presentation about the rate proposal. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chair, if, and the board, to see if there are any questions that, follow from there.
Adam, you were kind enough, Adam, to delay your questions, but I think you had a few earlier in the presentation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I also first wanted just to welcome Commissioner Agarwal. I've had the pleasure of working with Rick in a variety of different functions and known him for over 13 years and could not be more excited for his able leadership of the organization and its alignment with the city's overall climate agenda and goals. And just am so thrilled to have his and Vinny's continued leadership at the organization. So just wanted to formally go on the record of welcoming him and the tremendous skill and vision he's going to bring to the organization. One question which probably won't surprise the staff of this is, in light of the billing study, billing changes that have been implemented and the sustainable stormwater rate study that is happening, just curious, how that relates to this year's rate proposal, thinking about adding in a stormwater charge and how that may relate to future years.
I'll address that, Adam, and Omar can expand if need be. But at this point in time, since we did implement the new billing system last September, and we basically are allowing ourselves a year's period to go through the testing and shakedown of all the issues there. So we have the capacity to add, alternative rates within the new billing system. However, we would not be really contemplating any of that till post this calendar year. So moving into calendar year 20, what am I at right now? That would be starting into 23, that we would start being able to consider whether we wanted to do a stormwater charge, whether we wanted to do some sort of like fixed charge, other types of billing mechanisms. So, and I believe we're I will say, and Deputy Commissioner Lynch is on the phone as well, but the billing rollout has been going well. We've been seeing a lot of improvements. There still is some, one of the challenges being with the staffing level, as we talked about throughout this, but the work has been going well, and we think we're going to be successful at that. So we are hopeful that we'll be able to get into new rate setting structures once we have that done, which would include considering the stormwater charge.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Thanks very much. Are there other questions from members? I do have one, and it's about staffing. What's the objective, the number of DEP staff that we believe we should focus on, and where are we with regard to that number?
Britt, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, let me go ahead and say, and by the way, in this touches on something you mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman, about one of your concerns. I think it's important to recognize that we have, and Joe, you would have the precise number, no doubt, but somewhat above 6,000 lines in our budget. That's authorized and budgeted staff. We now have roughly 900 vacancies, so we're operating at a head count of roughly 5,200 staff across the agency. What's significant in one respect about that is that we've got so much hiring we need to do that we're completely fully budgeted under the numbers that you're being presented here. So there's no need for higher rates to deal with the staffing issues that we face.
Got it. Understood.
I think, we are in ongoing conversations with the Office of Management and Budget and City Hall about what our staffing prospects are. Of course, there's the twin issues of concerns by the mayor and OMB of keeping city employment or city government employment at reasonable numbers. But there's also the headwind, which is this is a difficult economy in which to hire, and that's true for every employer. I think we are focused right now on a handful of areas where there are either serious issues where we are right now, for example, asking understaffed divisions to work overtime or understaffed teams to work overtime to make up for understaffing, and we're seeing impacts there. We are also looking at, we are also focusing our efforts on employment vacancies where there are knock-on effects, where because one person or one team is a bottleneck because it is understaffed, and therefore it is undermining or slowing down work going on elsewhere in the organization. So that's kind of the focus right now. I do think, and I'll first of all say thank you to Member Freed, Adam, for your kind words, but to Adam's point about the stormwater rate, this is one of the reasons I think that DEP needs to take a step back over the course of this year and think about a number of things that are changing and how it relates to our strategy. We know that the climate is changing. That requires a strategic response from the agency. We know that the economy is changing. That also requires a strategic response from the agency. Some of you will remember that 10 years ago or so, there was an effort done called Operational Excellence that was focused on finding efficiencies with the agency. I think we may actually have a different task right now, which is actually to identify and justify what does the agency look like when it is fully staffed at the appropriate levels across the board. Because we also know that it does tend to be the case that the quote unquote lines that you are budgeted for tend to be backward looking. That's the historic tradition. And as we look ahead to what we really need to be at, we want to make sure that we are growing those areas that need growth. Some of which, you know, is around thinking differently also about the skills and the job titles as well.
Got it.
So in any case, it's something that we are taking very seriously. It's something I'm taking very seriously. In fact, just prior to this, I was having a conversation with our HR DC about this, you know, I think it is something that we will have a lot more to say to you about over the course of the year.
I'm sure you're paying a great deal of attention to this issue, Commissioner, and know that we on this board are very grateful for that. And you're bringing a new set of eyes to solving a problem that was unforeseeable 3 years ago. It's unbelievable that we are in the situation we're in. But good luck. Keep fingers crossed. I'm sure you'll figure it out because, well, you don't have a choice.
That is true.
Are there other questions from members? Hearing none.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Dan Zarrilli. I do have a few
yes,
things. So one, again, we'd like to echo Adam's congratulations to the commissioner and former Commissioner Sapienza for his continued service, and Rit, looking forward to all the great things you're going to do with DEP. A small thing, I'm curious if at some point this board can have a short conversation around the format of these meetings and whether these phone calls are the most appropriate way going forward. But I'll put that aside for a little bit. Mr. Chairman, I have a slightly different, I think, framing on the point and the question you raised around why 4.9%, and sort of from the other angle of wanting, to be sure that any increase certainly, of course, needs to cover the capital expenses, the operating expenses, to make sure the system is functioning in this new environment of this new climate era that we're all in, and certainly happy to see additional sewer and Blue Belt and other green infrastructure investments across the system. Incredibly vital, given everything we know about what's changing in our climate. I also appreciate the impact of any increase on lower income households, especially given everything else that's happening in the economy right now, whether it's inflation, some of the media we've seen around potential rent guidelines board increases, and how all of that continues, in small ways, just to add up to an unaffordability crisis that we continue to have in the city. And so any increase is not trivial. And so just to partly make that point and to understand whether or not we can see as a board in these continuing conversations around, the cash flows and things, whether there is a forward-looking sense of what the rate increases might be, not just this year, but some projections of what they could look like in the future. If we make a 4.9% choice this year, does that mean we can do a little less next year, or to understand how that fits into a longer term projection? And two, to understand.
I very much appreciate your question. It is one of the issues I would raise with Ed Marcus in any meeting that we might have.
Right.
But to Joe Murin's point, there is a document that may answer these questions and may or may not offer projections for possible rate increases or the lack thereof going forward.
Right.
I'm very anxious to know the answers to those questions, and I thank you for raising it. And the way in which you've raised it is really clear. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. And so just one last piece on that is just to also understand how the choice of the $30 million affordability program
Yep.
Whether that's the right number, whether it needs to be a different number. I'm certainly glad to see the rental payment eliminated in this calculation. That's, I think, been incredibly important. So these are the things that are on my mind as we're considering any rate increase, and we just would love to have that conversation and see that information when it's available. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, really thank you very much. You're really clear and pointed. I very much appreciate it. Commissioner, we will look to you and to Joe Murin and Omar Nazem for information as it becomes available that we might review. So thank you very much. We'll be looking for that. Are there other questions for the staff? Hearing none.
This is John.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please.
This is John. That's the question. Thank you. I'm just wondering if there is anything that folks think we can do to insulate the system against rising inflation. It's come up in several different contexts during the meeting. It's something that I think a lot of folks are, given that we set rates on an annual basis, is there anything we can build into the, from a financial perspective, that we can build into the system in order to provide that resiliency? That would be helpful to know.
It's a great question, John. But how do we insulate any segment of the economy against inflation? It's madness what's happening now, and there are reasons for the madness. But it's a fair question, and one that I think the chief financial officer and the treasurer of the water board might want to address. It may not have an answer. There may not be an answer for how we insulate the system against the vagaries of inflation. But why not to see if Joe or Omar might have an answer? I'm sorry. That's a terrible thing to do to the two of you, but what the hell?
Well, and to that point, Mr. Chair and Member Golden, we and the rate consultant, and we have had a long-standing practice in the rate model, and this gets to also to Member Zerilli's point as well, where when we do have the forward-looking aspect of the rate proposal, it includes an inflation factor. We have generally covered using a 3%. And in years past, as this past decade plus have shown, that has been more than adequate to cover both cost increases, collective bargaining needs, where there's been vagaries in inflationary items. It may not be sufficient if we're entering into a higher inflation mode. So that may be something we'll have to think about. I think to your point, Mr. Chair, to Member Golden's question, it's very hard to how do you hedge against that, because it's really, really difficult unless you're willing to pay a lot of money or have a lot of reserves on hand, which means that we could be raising, rates even higher just to have cash available just on those contingencies. So I think we could probably address this in what I put forth in that when we get to the board, and then to the general public, how we came up with the rate proposal. And that also, I think, we'll be able to address Member Zerilli's question as well. So we could, sort of weave those in there and hopefully address the questions as raised and be able to then, either, answer them or have elicit, a further discussion with the board.
Thank you very much.
I do want to add, Mr. Chair, that there are two more slides that we need to go through, unless that's the end of the questioning. I don't want to forestall the board from asking anything more. Did we lose the chairman?
Alfonso, do we have you?
Do we have everybody else?
This is Dan Zerilli. I'm still here.
We're still here. Yeah.
So I guess
We still have a quorum. So
We're still here.
pending Alfonso's.
okay. I will point out there was one last.
I'm sorry.
Arlene here.
Go ahead, Chair.
My participation was ended very unceremoniously.
I don't think you missed anything that we couldn't get to you in the transcript.
Well, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Were you all finished though with your comments on the member questions that you got just before I dropped off the call?
I believe I finished, and we were reopening to see if there were any other member questions before we moved on to the last two slides.
Well, then let's move on to the last two slides.
And so those we have the update on DEP sustainable rate study. I won't, read it because I think it's on the presentation, and I don't think it's really an update. And I know that Member Freed and other members are very interested in this. So I think it's consistent with what we've been saying, and with the group that's been meeting on a periodic basis as well. But I will ask if any members do have or the chair have questions regarding the sustainable rate study.
I don't have any, Mr. Chair.
Hearing none. What's the last item on in the package is the proposed calendar of hearings on the rate proposal, which all will be virtual. That we have the one we're doing today. The wholesale rate public hearing, which is the upstate rate, will be on Tuesday, May 24th. The first New York City public hearing will be a day one on Wednesday, May 25th at 2 p.m. The evening public hearing for in-city will be on Thursday, May 26th at 6 p.m. And then the board will convene again on Wednesday, June 1st to consider the rate proposal that's before them. And as noted, there may be an interim meeting depending on the package that we get to the board for the review in terms of the financials that have been raised.
Joe, thank you very much. Are there any questions or concerns about the schedule? I want to thank you all for arranging a schedule that only has one Friday meeting, the one we're having now. For those of us who like to get down to the Chesapeake, Monday and Friday meetings are hard, and I want to thank you all very much for working around my silly schedule. But I'm old and I like what I do with my spare time. Thank you very much for that. Are there questions from the members? Are there matters that need to be raised before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Then I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you, John. Mr. Secretary, I guess we have to call the roll to get a vote that matters on the record.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's.
Yeah,
do that.
I think that's the suggested process, Mr. Chairman.
That works for me, and the motion is approved.
So you want me
to go? Yeah, I want you to go through the
Okay.
members list.
Okay. This is the secretary taking a roll on a motion to adjourn the meeting. Chairman Carney, how do you vote?
To adjourn.
Member Fernandez Ketchum, how do you vote?
Adjourn.
Member Member Freed, how do you vote?
Adjourn.
Member Golden, how do you vote?
I vote to adjourn.
Member Sue, how do you vote? Okay, we'll go back to Member Sue at the end here. Member Shaw, how do you vote?
Adjourn.
Member Zarilli, how do you vote?
Vote to adjourn.
Okay, and checking in with Member Sue once again. Member Sue, are you on the phone? Okay, but for the people.
Thank you
who
very
are-
much, Mr. Secretary. We are adjourned. Mr. Commissioner,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And former Commissioner Sapienza, thank you for joining us today. I'd love to get together, sit and talk a little bit about this meeting with both you and the Commissioner when there is an opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would look forward to that.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Be well, everybody.
I'll
Thank you.
enjoy.
Okay, have a
Take
good
care.
weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.